Denise, and I am the secret weapon for experts, coaches, consultants, and network marketers seeking to create more credibility, more leads, and more money in the bank account. And I show you how to do all of that through webinars. And the best part about it is that when people work with me, I handle all of the end-to-end systems on the back end, so that all you have to do is show up and be brilliant.
I love that.
That's right. So what I'm going to talk to you today about in our short time together is that we'll talk about how webinars can help you make money in your business no matter what you sell. I will talk about some of the biggest misconceptions or myths about webinars and explain why those are not true. I will talk to you about how to choose the best platform and equipment for your webinar, regardless of your budget and needs. We'll talk about some of the biggest mistakes that webinar hosts make, and I'll tell you how to make sure you avoid those. And as a bonus, I'll also talk more about how webinars can help you build your list fast. Okay, so just quickly, just a bit more about me. Again, although I am a webinar expert, I typically introduce myself as a marketing automation specialist because I view webinars, again, as part of this larger effort. There's things, automated things you should be doing before a webinar, automated things you should be doing after a webinar to make sure that it fits into the larger picture of what you're doing to reach out to your potential leads. A little bit more about my background. I have 20 years of experience in leadership and business coaching, training, and teaching. I've been a professor for 20 years, and I have my own business doing leadership and business coaching. And as part of that business, I would do a monthly webinar. And my clients would ask me, hey, how'd you do that? I want to start doing that for my business. Can you show me? Can you show me? I don't understand. So I was helping more and more people with their own webinars and realized this is something a lot of people struggle with. It comes easy to me and I love this part. So that's when I transitioned and started my new business, Win with Webinars. And I've been doing this for about a year and a half now. So who is this talk for? This is for you if you are a network marketer and you want to build your downline. If you want to expose your opportunity to more and more people, then webinars are for you. It's also for you if you're a coach or a consultant who has some sort of online program or course and you want to drive traffic to that. You want people to sign up for that program. Now, many of you might just have a kind of business where maybe you have a big ticket item or your business is really based on those one-on-one conversations, but you need more of them. So webinars are another great way for you to get people to sign up for those one-on-one conversations, whether it's a strategy session or an opportunity call, whatever it is. Webinars can help you do that as well. And it's also for anybody who just wants raving fans. You want to build a community of people who are fans of yours, who are drawn to you and drawn to your products and services. So to start, I want you to think about whether or not this describes you. You are an expert in your area, but it just seems like you are not able to attract your target audience, or your target audience is just not buying from you, even though you know that thing that you have to offer, that coaching program, that online course, this business opportunity is exactly what they need, but they're just not converting. And the reality is that could be because we know, we're all in a networking situation, we know that people do not likely buy until they get to know, like, and trust you. The challenge is that process of getting someone to know, like, and trust you can take a long time. You know, we know that it can take several touches sometimes before somebody decides to buy from you. What makes this a secret weapon is that webinars speed up that process. Webinars, and let me just explain what a webinar is. A webinar is really just a web-based seminar, or workshop, or teaching, or training, or masterclass. So all it means is that you're doing some sort of teaching or training, which usually ends in some sort of selling, some sort of offer being made, in a video conferencing platform. So if you've ever used FaceTime, or Skype, or Periscope, or Facebook Live, all of those are that kind of online system where people can see you. But what makes webinars better is that people are coming to you. They're choosing to hear what you have to say, and they're willing to exchange their information for that. webinars can help you make money in your business. Several different ways. And again, no matter what you're doing, webinars can help you. Number one, they help you build your list. Because just like what I just said, unlike a Periscope or a Facebook Live where people are watching you talk, in a webinar, they can't get that information from you until they give you their name and email. So they've already self-selected and said, you're talking about something that I find interesting. You have these leads that are already kind of prepped, already screened. You know that they have something, that they're interested in what you have to say. So they're going to give you their name and email in exchange. So just that is useful because you're building your list of qualified leads. Webinars also help you make money because it establishes you as an expert. The fact that I'm standing in front of you talking about webinars suggests that maybe I know something about webinars. You know, just you being the one on stage establishes you as an expert. So think about how that works for your own business. It also is a great way to showcase your products or services. So if I just say, you know, here's this lovely card, and I'm showing you this card, it's one thing to see it as an ad, it's another for me to show you all the different things that you can do with this card. And I'm doing a demo, and I'm talking up the benefits of it. And so even if people don't buy that service or that product or that course right at that moment, you've planted that seed in their mind. So now the next time they're thinking, you know, I do need some jewelry for this upcoming event. Oh, I was on that webinar with Premier Designs, which this is. I was on that
Little
webinar.
plug there.
Call her. You know, so you're planting that seed in someone's mind. And then it also can lead to more sales. You know, ultimately for many of us, that's what we want. That's why we're doing a webinar. So often at the end of a webinar, you're making some sort of offer for your product, for your service, and people are much more likely than many other sources to convert, to take action on that webinar. Take action as a result of that webinar. So some people may buy on the webinar, some people may buy in the follow-up emails that you should be sending out after your webinar. Webinars, if it's well structured, you can expect around a 20% conversion rate. So it's very high conversion rate. And by conversion, I mean people buying. So just think about this. Imagine how it would feel for you to make those sales that you want to make, for you to be able to have those opportunity conversations, for you to have those strategy sessions, all from you sitting at home in front of your computer, where people can see you from the top, but you got your pajama bottoms and your slippers on underneath. You don't have to leave your house. You don't have to pay for the gas. So it's
have on a blazer and my bunny slippers.
So that's the feeling. That's the power of webinars and what makes them so wonderful.
How they say business on the top.
That's right. Exactly. Pajamas on the bottom. That's webinars. So before I go further, the reason that a lot of people don't do webinars is because they have a lot of misconceptions about them. So let me just bust through some of these myths. One is that webinars are no longer in style. People aren't doing them anymore. That couldn't be further from the truth. There is some data that shows that 60% of online marketers use webinars as part of their marketing strategy. So it's something that is being done, continues to be done, and as long as it's done well, it's something that continues to convert. Another myth is that you have to have this huge mailing list in order for a webinar to be successful. But remember what I said, the webinar itself is the way to start building your list. So you don't have to have a huge list, you just need to have a good list. And so it's about taking your list no matter what size it is and structuring the webinar in a way that speaks to the interests of those people that are on your list so that you're going to convert. You're also going to build your list by publicizing your webinar, running Facebook ads, and doing other things to drive new people to your list. Another myth is that webinars involve a lot of expensive equipment and a lot of technology that's difficult to set up. It's quite likely you already have all the equipment you need to do a webinar. Because if you have a computer that has a webcam, then you're good to go on the equipment side. And depending on your skill with technology or how complex or simple you want it to be, the technology piece can be relatively easy. And then if you just plain don't like the technology, then you hire me to do that part for you so you just show up for your webinar. And then the piece I'd like to continue to stress is that a myth is that a webinar is this kind of one and done, standalone marketing technique, but you really do need to figure out where does this webinar fit in the overall picture of what it is I'm trying to do. What are the emails I'm sending out to my list beforehand so that they're ready for this webinar? How am I continuing this conversation after the webinar to continue to nurture these new people that are now on my list, whether they bought or not? So you really need to kind of see it in terms of the big picture. All right, so what does it take to do a webinar? As with anything, we want to answer the 5 whys. First of all, who, which means who's actually presenting on the webinar, which would be you, as well as who is your target audience. And part of the reason we want to make sure we understand who our target audience is number one, we should always know that for our businesses anyway, but that also helps us figure out what their pain points are, what their concerns are, so we can make sure we target the webinar to those people. So who are the people that we want to show up on the webinar? What would be, what is the topic of the webinar? How do you come up with a good webinar topic? You want to start from, I usually say start with the end in mind. So think in terms of what is that product, service, opportunity that you want to actually sell at the end of the webinar. So if it's about your online course, then you want to make sure the content of the webinar is driving people logically to that eventual offer. So I wouldn't do a webinar all about webinars and then at the end do an offer about setting up their cable system. You know, it's totally unrelated. So make sure you think about what your offer is going to be, and then you build the content from that, but also keeping in mind who's my target audience and what kind of stuff do they want to know about. The why would be why the webinar is important. That ties back to the offer piece. What is it that you're selling? What is your product or service? And so start think also about how you deliver it, how somebody would sign up for it. If you were to offer it on a webinar, could somebody actually buy it right then? What are the systems that need to be set in place for that? The when would be, what time would be ideal for your webinar? And if we just look at averages across all webinars, the best days are Tuesdays and Wednesdays. The best time is 11 a.m. Pacific, which is 1 p.m. Central. But going back to the who, what time are your people going to be available to do a webinar? So if your target market would be people that have a full-time job and they're trying to do their own business on the side, they're probably working at 1 in the afternoon and they don't have time to sit on your webinar. So you want to do your webinar in the evening because that might be when they're available. And even though I said Tuesday and Wednesday is best, if your people are at church at prayer service on Wednesday evenings, then it doesn't make sense to do a webinar at that time. So that's why you have to know your people well enough to know where they're going to be and what time is best for them. And then the where has to do with what platform you are going to use. So I'm going to get into that more, but just think in terms of how much technology do you want to be involved in? What platforms do you already have access to? I'll get into the pros and cons of some of the other ones, and we'll get into that part. Oh, which was next. I remember. Okay, the where piece of where you're going to host your webinar. There are so many different options out there about webinar platforms. Just about every time I do one of these talks, somebody comes up and says, "Oh, well, have you heard about such and such platform?" And I'm like, I haven't heard that particular one, but I mean, literally every time I'm thinking of something new. But all of these are ones that I've used in some capacity or another. So the easiest way to do it is what we used to call Hangouts on Air, which is now called just YouTube Live. So going live on YouTube. Hangouts on Air was always owned by Google. YouTube is owned by Google. Google owns everything, owns all of us. So it is a free way to do a webinar. It's a way to broadcast free. You just give people the link, and when they click on that link, if you're in front of your computer, you're live and they see you. So it's great in terms of being free, But because it's free, there's no way to like sign people up for it or follow up with people. So other companies have kind of built a shell around that. And so we still kind of use the Hangouts on Air terminology, even though it's actually YouTube Live. But companies like Webinar Jam Studio created like this shell around the Hangouts on Air, where it's an excellent platform where they have registration pages. They create the webinar room that people log into. They even have a little video that plays before people log in so they understand how to use the system. And then on the webinar, you can pop in a poll question and ask people, you know, how many webinars have you been on before? You can pop in your offer of if you want to sign up for such and such product, click here and it just pops in. So it has all these great bells and whistles. The downside is that if YouTube decides they want to change something, then Webinar Jam doesn't have any control over that. So that actually just happened recently, where YouTube was like, we're going to change how you log in. And so then they had to just scramble and let all their customers know, here's the new login procedure. The other thing that I don't love about it is that you can only sign up for a year at a time. They don't have a monthly plan, and it's about $3.99 a year. So it's kind of like an all or nothing kind of thing. So all of these are good. The other one I would recommend you look into is Zoom. So you may have used Zoom for small group meetings, and one thing that's nice about Zoom is that, particularly the small groups, you're on camera and everybody else is on camera also, so you can interact. It's great for if you have an online coaching program or a meeting. However, what I don't like about Zoom for webinars, if you just use the Zoom meeting, is that everybody's on camera. Not everybody realizes they're on camera. Right. So one of my clients was doing a webinar, and there was a naked guy who clearly didn't realize he was on camera. And I'm like trying to tell him to tell the guy to turn his camera off. And you have control and you can kind of figure out who's who.
Clothes on, dude.
But it's just like, but clearly he didn't realize his camera was on. But that's only that's only with the meeting, the Zoom meeting version. So Zoom has, the Zoom meeting version for $14.99 a month, you can have 50 people on there, and it costs more with more people. Right. They have a webinar version where then it's just the camera going one way, where everybody sees you when you don't see everybody. No, that ends up being about $69 or $70 a month to do the webinar version. And so they all have pros and cons, and you want to look at the pricing and how easy or difficult it is to use. But I like both of those, Zoom and Webinar Jam. Now, what kind of equipment do you need? First, you need to have a camera. So the camera can either be the camera that comes right on your computer. For most cameras, particularly if you have a Mac cameras are very clear. They're wonderful. If you want to get even clearer, you can go a little bit more high-end. So the camera that I use is the Logitech C920, which costs under $100, and it just plugs right into USB on your drive. It's an HD camera, very, very clear, and I just am picky about that. I like a really clear
Now you said, does it plug in? You just plug it into
to the USB.
To the USB port. Okay.
Yes. You also may want to have a headset, and it depends. You can either do just use your camera's mic. Your computer's microphone, which often that's fine. If you want a clearer sound, you can use a microphone that plugs in. So I don't have a regular microphone plugged in here, pictured here. But you can use one of the microphones that plugs in with a USB. So the one that I use is it's called a Blue Yeti. It looks like an old-fashioned kind of radio mic. It's about this big. And I have that sitting on my desk. If you are going to have a guest presenter, where there's more than one of you presenting at a time, then both of you need to have something where your ears are covered, where the sound is, meaning that the sound is not coming back out of your computer. And so you can create that also by just muting the sound on your computer. But the reason we're doing this is because I'm talking in the microphone. It comes out of the speaker and goes back into the microphone, and that's why sometimes you'll be on webinars or meetings and it's all kind of feedback and echo and it sounds all crazy, and that's because the sound is looping back and around. So it's either muting or making sure that everybody has some headsets on. And I will just say as an aside, if you're going to have a co-presenter, please make sure you all practice together so that everybody, so first of all, you know if there's an issue, but then also to make sure everybody understands the technology. You also are going to, if you're going to have slides, you want to create your slides either in PowerPoint or a Keynote, but also recognize, number one, you don't have to have slides. So if you don't like creating slides, don't let that be the thing that holds you up. You just do the whole webinar with just you on camera. The reverse is also true. If you're camera shy, you do the entire webinar with just the slides showing and just people just hear your voice. There is nothing wrong with doing it that way, and a lot of high-end webinar hosts do it that way. I mean, it's a very common way to host a webinar. Is that they never see you, they just hear your voice.
So that's all the ones from an HR perspective I sit in on. They're all just the PowerPoint showing.
Exactly.
You never see the speaker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And probably they're probably using GoToWebinar
Yeah.
for the platform. Instead of GoToWebinar platform, you can even use. They've actually just started allowing people to use video, but for the most part, it's just slides. So that's perfectly fine. And then you want to make sure you have a good internet connection. So best means that you get your Ethernet cable and make sure that you're hardwired into the internet. So for most of us, that means you have this thing that looks like an old-fashioned, well, depending on how old you are, it looks like a telephone wire, telephone cord that is plugged into the back of the router and then goes into the back of the computer. Now, that might mean if you're like me, where the router is downstairs and my office is upstairs, I have the cord that goes from the back of the router, round, down, up the stairs, and it's all tapped down, and then into my office. My husband's like, really? I'm like, it's my business. But if your husband's not as understanding as mine is, then you plug it in for the webinar, and you just unplug it after the webinar and tell people not to trip over it, and that's fine. Now, if you don't want to do all that, then you just run the way you normally do off of Wi-Fi, but just recognize that it's not as fast as a hardwire, and the signal could potentially drop. I have not ever had that happen, but it is something that could potentially happen, and it's just one more thing to think about. It's all like to be hardwired in.
Yeah. That happened to me when I was doing Facebook
Oh, no.
Live, and I went flying up the stairs to the modem and plugged in. I was like, oh my gosh. So, yes.
Yes. Okay, so what are some of those mistakes I was talking about that webinar hosts make? One is not respecting attendees' time in a number of different ways.
Yep.
One thing I cannot stand, if you say your webinar starts at 7 p.m., can we start at 7 p.m.? I'm like, start at the time that you say you're going to start. Now, I will say, other webinar experts have said, and I know they teach this in their programs, that you wait until you have X number of people in the room and then you start, even if that means you start 10 minutes late. I think that's so rude to the one person that showed up on time. If one person's there, I start. So you want to respect their time, but you also respect their time on the other end, meaning that if you said it's going to be an hour webinar, then you wrap up at the hour point. If you said it's going to be 90 minutes, then you wrap up after 90 minutes, so that, because people have planned out their time and they only thought they were going to be there for a certain amount of time. Another mistake is not promoting enough. So you should be promoting to your current list, meaning the people that are already in your email database, at least 1 to 2 weeks in advance of your webinar. Don't go further than that, because 3 or 4 weeks out, if I send you an email about a webinar I'm having 4 weeks from now, you're going to totally forget about it.
Yeah.
So make it that sense of urgency. Schedule like a week out, but then send 2 or 3 emails about it. You're also going to publicize absolutely everywhere else. So you want to create a Facebook ad. You want to create a Facebook event. You're going to want to create a Eventbrite, allows you to post online events. You want to share it in speaking engagements. Now's the time you're going to want to do Facebook Live and do Periscope and drive traffic to that registration page. So I'm not anti-Periscope and Facebook Live, but I think that's a great first step to then send people to your registration page. Now you have their name and email, and then they're in your list, and then invite them to the webinar.
But Zoom doesn't ask for the name and email.
If you do the Zoom webinar version, they have registration pages. If you're going to do regular Zoom, then you're correct. You would need to have some other way to register them. So for people doing Zoom, I would recommend you use a service like leadpages.net, which is all sorts of landing pages. Or if you have, depending on your email system, if you have MailChimp, Constant Contact, just about any of the Infusionsoft, Aweber, you can actually create just a single registration page inside of those systems, so that then the person signs up there, and then you have an automated email that goes out with the Zoom information. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Another mistake is not interacting enough with your audience. So if you're doing a live webinar, people want to know that it's live. So you want to greet people as they come in. You may say, oh, hey, everybody tell me where you're from, put that in the chat, and then say, oh, it's Denise from New Jersey, and glad to see you here, and talk to them. You also want to include some polls. If your system allows you to pop in a poll where you can actually show the results, that's great. But if not, you do the same way many people do on Periscope. Oh, if you've done a webinar before, put a 1 in the chat, and do something again to engage them. Even before the webinar, you can send them an email saying, even before we get started, I want to make sure that I get your questions answered. Please email me back with any questions you have, and I'll make sure I cover them on the webinar. So it's just something so they feel like they've been touched, you're interacting with them. You also want to make sure that you have a purpose, a reason for the webinar. And I talked about this before, you got to have that why. So you don't want to do a webinar just for the sake of doing a webinar. There has to be a reason you're doing that webinar. So is it to educate people? So it's all right that you're not selling anything. Maybe the purpose of this webinar is to show all the different fragrance lines that are coming out in our company this year. Maybe it's to educate people on healthcare changes. So that you're just touching people, and then later you're going to do a webinar where you upsell them to some sort of offer. So what is your why? Why are you doing the webinar? And then that ties into the last mistake, is that sometimes you'll get on these webinars, and from the very beginning, they're trying to sell you stuff, selling stuff. Now, if you're on somebody's webinar, they're probably going to try to sell you something. We all know that. We know that was the price of admission.
Right.
But we also want good content. We want to learn something. We want to walk away with something. We don't want a whole bunch of, well, I'll tell you about it, but you got to join my program. That where the whole thing, where the whole webinar is just little tiny tidbits of stuff, but you can't really do anything with it.
Yeah.
Yes.
X.
Right, exactly. So you want to make sure on your webinar that you give, and then sell.
Yes.
That should be your formula for the webinar, that it should be giving and serving and over-serving, so that you're showing them, wow, she knows what she's talking about. Look at how much information she's giving away for free. Imagine what the paid program must be like. And so people are going to want to sign up for that paid program. Well, now I'm frozen. That's right. I know what I'm talking about next. So the last thing I want to share with you is ways that webinars can help you build your list, just as a little bonus. So even after the webinar is over, you can still use it to build your list. Because think about, at the end of a webinar, usually what we have is the question and answer period. That is just gold right there. Listen to the questions that they are asking and make sure you're getting those questions down, because you're going to use that information to write your blog, to come up with Facebook posts, to come up with the topic for your next webinar. They told you exactly what questions they want answered, so use that information. You also want to repurpose that webinar. So you're going to want to take that webinar, you could save that video, you could chop it up into smaller videos, and make the small videos Facebook posts. include the small videos in emails. So again, everything's about nurturing people and creating new opportunities with that information. You can take that webinar, send it off to somebody on Fiverr, have them create a transcript of the webinar. So now you have it as a text. Turn that into an ebook. And then use that ebook to generate more leads.
Wait, wow. Wait, go back to Fiverr, whatever on that.
Oh my gosh.
So
Yes,
you
yes,
can
okay.
send your webinar to Fiverr to
You
create a
find,
transcript?
just search for transcribe, and you can send either the whole webinar or just the audio to just find someone on Fiverr to do it. Now with Fiverr, okay, no.
Is it
I want to respect.
I know,
your
no, is it
time. So number 5.
And the,
Five.
Fiverr, 2 R's.
Oh, Fiverr, yeah.
Fiverr.com.
$5 or whatever.
Yeah, so their whole thing is you can hire somebody to do anything for $5. It's not really $5. It's like, oh, that was just a
It's like the dollar store, right? Yeah, it's not really $1, but they get you in this.
Right. And with Fiverr, it's always the luck of the draw to find somebody good. So it may take you a couple times to find a really good contractor, but if you find a good person, then that's another person on your team then from that point on.
So they
Yeah.
transcribe
Yeah,
it
5 stars.
into text.
Exactly.
Okay.
And
So
then
then you make that into slides or to emails or to
Yeah, whatever you want.
ebook.
Exactly. Cool. So then that can help you generate even more.
Can I just add that I couldn't write what I needed to say about a product, so I just sent on the notes to this guy, and it cost me $57 to get it written perfectly.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah.
And you did it through this Fiverr?
Yeah.
Right. So again, the $5
I mean,
is
the-
the floor, but then they're like, but if you want me to do this, and this, well, that's going to be $100. Like, you know, but still great prices if you.
It started with a 5.
Yeah, it starts with a 5.
We've derailed Denise, so yeah.
So everything I shared with you today are just some of the things about webinars. I actually have a webinar about webinars next Thursday, so I'm going to pass around little cards. So if you want to register, you can just go to that link and sign up.
It's probably these.
And that is it for today. I want to open up. I have
Yes.
no time at all, so I'll just say thank you so much.
Wait. I gotta give her a gift. Will you take a picture that is worthy?
Oh, thank you. Yes, yep.
Because that keeps shining in her face.
Yeah.
So, can you turn
Probably. Great. I want to take a